You turned your driveway into an RV campground overnight. That was the first thing Patricia Reynolds said when I opened my front door at 6:08 in the morning. Bang, bang, bang. Her fist had hit the glass hard enough to pull me out of the kitchen with a coffee mug still warming my hand. Cold air rolled across the porch when I opened the door. Patty stood halfway down my driveway in a navy cardigan, phone already raised, staring at the white Class C RV parked beside my house like it had appeared there through an act of war. My name is Nathan Cole. I was 45, a residential electrical contractor, and I'd lived in Cedar Ridge long enough to know that Patty didn't usually knock before she had already decided what the problem was. Morning, Patty. That thing cannot stay here. I followed her stare. Dew silvered the RV windshield. Beneath it, an orange extension cord ran from my garage to an exterior connection near the rear compartment. Patty pointed at the cord. You even hooked it up. Click. She took a photograph. That proves you're storing it here. It's leaving this morning. It already stayed overnight. Click. Another photograph. RV cord. Driveway. I set my coffee on the porch rail. It got here late last night. Exactly. That doesn't tell us which rule applies. Her eyebrows lifted. Recreational vehicles aren't allowed to be stored in driveways. Stored. The word landed differently than overnight. I looked at the RV again. My older brother Michael had arrived at 9:43 the previous night with his 17-year-old daughter Emily in the passenger seat and a warning indicator glowing on the dashboard. They were supposed to be halfway toward a campground by then. Instead, Michael had called me because something in the electrical system wasn't behaving normally, and after 9 hours on the road, he wasn't interested in gambling with another dark stretch of highway. Neither was I. So we pulled the RV completely onto my driveway. I connected temporary power, checked what I could in the dark, and told him we'd finish troubleshooting after sunrise. Patty didn't know any of that yet. She only saw the cord. I'm documenting this, she said. That's fine. She seemed almost disappointed by my answer. And I'm reporting it to the HOA. That's fine too. You don't seem to understand. It needs to be removed. It will be. Immediately. I glanced at my watch. 6:11. Michael and his daughter are still asleep. That's not my problem. No. The electrical issue is mine. Her phone lowered slightly. Electrical issue? I didn't answer immediately. I walked down the driveway and crouched beside the orange cord. Overnight moisture had darkened the concrete around it. I checked the connection, then looked toward the RV window. No movement inside. I'm going to finish testing it when they wake up, I said. Then they're leaving. Patty raised the phone again. Hookups. Overnight occupancy. RV in a residential driveway. Nathan, that's storage. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. I wasn't going to invent an answer before I read the actual rule. I spent my working life around codes, permits, and people who remembered what a document said instead of opening it. I had learned the expensive difference between those two things. Send me the provision you're relying on. Patty stared at me. You want the rule? The exact one. Gladly. She turned and walked toward the sidewalk, already typing. I picked up my coffee. Behind me, the orange cord disappeared beneath the RV like a bright line drawn across the driveway. Patty thought that cord proved we were settling in. What she didn't know was that the cord was there for exactly the opposite reason. It was there so the RV could leave. Michael's headlights had swept across my living room wall at exactly 9:43 the night before. I remember the time because I was shutting down my laptop when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I'm outside, his message said. Something electrical is acting weird. When I stepped into the driveway, the RV engine was still running. Diesel exhaust hung faintly in the cool air, mixing with the smell of damp leaves. Michael climbed down looking exhausted. Emily sat in the passenger seat wrapped in a gray sweatshirt, her forehead against the window. What happened? I asked. Warning light came on about 20 miles back. House system started dropping. Out too. I climbed inside. The dashboard glowed amber and green. Michael showed me the warning indicator, then demonstrated how part of the auxiliary electrical system had become intermittent. Can we keep driving? He asked. Maybe, I said. But I'm not telling you to keep pushing tonight until I know what's happening. He rubbed both hands over his face. They had already been traveling most of the day, and the campground they planned to reach was still hours away. I wasn't interested in turning fatigue and an unresolved electrical problem into a roadside emergency. Pull all the way into the driveway, I said. We'll check it properly in daylight. Michael eased the RV forward until every tire was completely off the street. I grabbed my flashlight, tool bag, and orange extension cord from the garage. Click. The exterior compartment opened. I connected temporary shore power so I could stabilize the house system, test the charging side, and avoid draining anything further while we worked. Emily stepped down and stretched. Are we camping at Uncle Nathan's now? Worst campground in America, I said. No lake. Terrible gift shop. She laughed for the first time that night. Michael placed a leveling block beneath one wheel because the driveway had enough slope to make the RV sit awkwardly while they rested. That little plastic block would later become another piece of Patty's case. To her, cord plus block plus overnight meant permanence. To me, they were two practical objects being used for a few hours. At 10:02, I took a photograph of the electrical compartment and texted it to Michael so we had a reference before closing everything up. The timestamp would matter later. At the time, it was just habit. We'll start again at 7, I told him. If it checks out, you leave. If it doesn't, we call somebody who can handle the RV-specific side. Michael nodded. Works for me. I unplugged my diagnostic meter but left the temporary power connected. The orange cord stretched across the concrete under the porch light, bright enough to see from the sidewalk. I remember looking at it before going inside and thinking I should probably move it closer to the garage wall so nobody tripped. I never imagined someone would treat it like evidence. By 10:20, the driveway was silent. No lawn chairs, no awning, no music, no campsite, just a disabled-for-the-night RV, 2 tired travelers sleeping inside, and an electrical contractor waiting for daylight. Then morning came. At 6:08, Patty started pounding on my door. By 6:11, she had photographed the RV, the leveling block, and that orange cord from 3 different angles. At 6:16, my phone buzzed. Her message contained a screenshot from the Cedar Ridge rules. I enlarged it with my thumb. The heading read, Storage of Recreational Vehicles. I read the paragraph once. Then again, slower. Patty had been very specific about what she believed the rule meant. But one word she kept using that morning wasn't anywhere in the provision she had sent me. Overnight. At 6:23, Patty sent a second message. RV must be removed by noon to avoid escalation. I read it twice, mostly because I was looking for the part where Cedar Ridge had appointed her the human version of a countdown clock. There wasn't one. Outside, morning light was beginning to burn the dew off the RV windshield. Michael stepped down wearing yesterday's jeans and carrying 2 cups of coffee. I'm guessing the woman taking pictures of my leveling block isn't welcoming committee. Patty Reynolds. Oh, you've heard of her? You've mentioned her. I showed him the screenshot. Storage of recreational vehicles. Michael read it, then looked toward his RV. Are we storing it? That's what I'm trying to determine. I opened the complete HOA rules on my tablet instead of relying on Patty's cropped screenshot. The provision restricted storage of recreational vehicles on residential lots except under specified conditions. I read the surrounding paragraphs carefully. Nothing in the section Patty cited said that any RV remaining on a driveway for one night automatically became stored. Nothing used the word overnight. That didn't mean another rule couldn't apply. It meant I hadn't found one yet. At 6:41, Patty returned. Did you read it? I did. Then we're done. Not quite. Her jaw tightened. Nathan, it says storage of recreational vehicles. Yes. The RV stayed here overnight. Also yes. So it was stored. I looked at her. Where does the provision define one overnight stop as storage? She pointed toward the driveway instead of answering. You connected power. There's a leveling block under the wheel. People slept inside it. Because Michael had an electrical problem and they stopped traveling for the night. That sounds like camping. Michael gave me a look from behind his coffee cup, but wisely stayed quiet. I said, if there's a separate rule prohibiting overnight occupancy or temporary RV parking, send me that provision too. Everyone knows RVs aren't supposed to stay overnight in Cedar Ridge. I'm asking what the document says. Patty raised her phone. Click. This time she photographed me standing beside the orange cord with my tool bag open. Keep documenting, I said. I plan to. By 7:06, I was inside the RV checking connections while Michael monitored the panel. The problem turned out to be less dramatic than the warning had made it look. A failed connector in the charging circuit had created an intermittent connection. I replaced the damaged component, checked the fuse protection, then ran the system under load. Click. Meter leads connected. Converter running. The voltage held steady. At 8:41, I photographed the final reading and the replaced connector beside my tools. Michael exhaled. So we're good. Run your checks. Then yes. Outside, Patty was no longer standing in the street, but I could see her blinds move across the road. At 9:09, I disconnected the orange cord. Click. I coiled it over my forearm and carried it into the garage. At 9:17, Michael started the RV. The engine settled into a low rumble. Emily waved through the passenger window. Patty appeared on her porch just as Michael backed out. Her phone came up. Click. She photographed the RV leaving. Guess she got what she wanted, Michael said through the open window. I looked at the empty section of driveway where the RV had spent less than 12 hours. Maybe. He drove away. Patty lowered her phone with the satisfied expression of someone who believed a deadline had worked. The strange part was, Patty and I had wanted the same physical outcome all morning. The RV safely back on the road. We just disagreed about something more important. She believed saying, "gone by noon," created authority. I believed authority had to exist before the deadline. And at 9:26, 9 minutes after the RV disappeared around the corner, my inbox chimed with the document that would turn that disagreement into an official fight. The email subject line read, Cedar Ridge HOA, Notice of RV Storage Violation. I opened it standing in the garage with the orange extension cord still looped over my left arm. For a second, I just stared at the timing. The RV was gone. Michael was already heading toward the highway. The driveway was empty except for a damp rectangle where the tires had rested overnight. Yet somehow the violation had arrived after the thing supposedly being stored was already moving 30 miles away. I set the cord on my workbench and opened the attachment. A recreational vehicle was observed being stored overnight on the residential property in violation of community restrictions governing recreational vehicle storage. There was that word again. Overnight. I scrolled to the cited provision. Same section Patty had sent me. Same heading. Storage of recreational vehicles. I read every sentence again. The provision regulated storage. It described where recreational vehicles could be stored under specified conditions. But the violation notice had added something the cited language itself did not say, that remaining overnight automatically established storage. I didn't assume that made the warning invalid. Maybe Cedar Ridge had another provision. Maybe a definition appeared elsewhere. Maybe management had adopted guidance I hadn't found. So I wrote back, please identify the specific provision or definition establishing that this temporary overnight stop constitutes prohibited storage, and provide any separate rule prohibiting overnight RV parking or occupancy, if that is the basis of the notice. Then I attached nothing. Not yet. At 10:04, Patty sent me a text. I told you this would be reported. I answered. I received the notice. 3 dots appeared. Then you. Understand. I understand what they cited. The dots returned. Same thing. I looked through the open garage toward the empty driveway. That's what we'll find out. By noon, I had created a folder on my laptop. Not because I wanted a war with the HOA, but because I knew what happened when facts lived in 6 different places. First, my doorbell camera. Michael's RV entered the driveway at 9:43 p.m. Second, the photograph of the electrical compartment at 10:02 p.m. Third, Patty's photographs beginning around 6:11 a.m. Fourth, my 8:41 a.m. photograph showing the completed repair and replaced connector. Fifth, driveway camera footage showing the RV departing at 9:17 a.m. I wrote the times on a legal pad. 9:43 p.m., 10:02 p.m., 6:11 a.m., 8:41 a.m., 9:17 a.m. Arrival, temporary connection, complaint, repair, departure. The sequence didn't prove that every temporary RV stop was permitted. It proved what actually happened at my house. At 2:18, management replied. They confirmed the notice had been issued under the recreational vehicle storage provision and said the matter could be reviewed if I disputed its application. No separate overnight parking provision was included. That was when the argument changed for me. Until then, I had been asking whether Patty knew a rule I didn't. Now I knew exactly what rule Cedar Ridge was relying on. I printed the complete provision and laid it beside my timeline. Then another message from Patty arrived. The issue is simple. RVs cannot be parked overnight in residential driveways. I searched the document again. Overnight. 0 results in the cited section. I leaned back and listened to the quiet garage. No engine. No travelers. No RV. Just the faint smell of electrical insulation from the connector I had replaced and the orange cord hanging from my workbench. Patty had started with storage. Now that the RV was gone, she was calling it overnight parking. Those sounded similar when spoken quickly. On paper, they were not automatically the same thing. And if Cedar Ridge wanted to punish me for one, I was going to make them show me where they had written it. By Tuesday morning, my little timeline had stopped looking like notes and started looking like a story nobody could stretch without breaking something. 9:43 p.m., Michael arrived. 10:02 p.m., temporary power connected while I documented the electrical problem. 6:11 a.m., Patty began photographing the RV. 8:41 a.m., repair completed and tested. 9:17 a.m., the RV departed. I wrote each time in black marker across a single sheet of paper and taped it above my workbench. Beneath it hung the orange extension cord, neatly coiled now, looking far less dramatic than it had in Patty's photographs. At 10:14, Cedar Ridge Management sent me the complaint packet. I opened the PDF expecting the same close-ups Patty had taken from the sidewalk. RV windshield, leveling block, cord, driveway. They were all there. Then I reached photograph 6. I stopped scrolling. Patty had taken it at 8:19 that morning. In the frame, I was kneeling beside the RV with my tool bag open. My meter rested near the electrical compartment. The orange cord crossed the driveway behind me. Patty had apparently intended the image to prove the RV was still hooked up after sunrise. Instead, it showed exactly what I had told her I was doing. Working on the vehicle before Michael continued his trip. I checked the timestamp again. 8:19, 22 minutes before my final test photograph. 58 minutes before departure. I printed it. Then I placed it beside my 8:41 repair photo and the receipt for the replacement connector I had pulled from my service inventory. 3 images told a sequence without needing me to exaggerate anything. Work in progress. Repair completed. Vehicle gone. That afternoon, I received another message from Patty. The photos clearly show overnight occupancy and utility hookup. Her wording had changed again. First, the RV was being stored. Then it was illegally parked overnight. Now the problem was occupancy and hookup. I replied with one sentence. Please identify the provision you believe those facts violate. No answer came. At 4:32, management did answer. They scheduled a compliance review for Thursday evening and attached the provision that would be considered. I opened it. Same recreational vehicle storage section. Nothing new. No separate overnight prohibition. No sentence declaring that temporary electrical connection automatically constituted storage. I felt something shift then. Not triumph. Certainty. Until that moment, I had kept room in my head for the possibility that I had missed something. Maybe another rule. Maybe an incorporated policy. Maybe language buried in a definition section. I had searched. I had asked. Management had now identified the provision themselves. So I stopped asking what Patty remembered and started preparing to discuss what Cedar Ridge had actually written. I created 3 headings on a legal pad. Time. Purpose. Rule. Under time, I wrote 9:43 p.m. to 9:17 a.m. Under purpose, electrical problem, temporary troubleshooting, continued travel. Under rule, storage provision cited. No separate overnight language provided. Then I looked at Patty's 8:19 photograph again. She had captured my hands beside the open electrical compartment, tools scattered on the concrete, orange cord running toward the garage. The image she believed made the driveway look like a campsite looked completely different when placed between arrival and departure. That was the strange thing about evidence. Sometimes nothing inside the photograph changed. Only the context around it did. Patty had photographed the cord because she thought it proved permanence. By Thursday night, I was going to show the committee why it proved exactly the opposite. Somebody was actively getting that RV ready to leave. Thursday evening, I carried one folder into the Cedar Ridge clubhouse. No binder. No stack of highlighted pages. Just the timeline, the repair documentation, Patty's photograph, and the rule they had actually cited. The room smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead while rain tapped softly against the windows. Patty was already seated near the front with several printed photographs arranged across the table. When she saw me, she glanced at my thin folder. That's all you brought. That's all I need to understand what happened. Her mouth tightened. At 7:02, HOA President Richard Bennett called the compliance review to order. Patty spoke first. This is straightforward. A recreational vehicle was parked in a residential driveway overnight. It was connected to utilities, stabilized with a leveling block, and occupied overnight. That is RV storage. Richard looked toward me. Mr. Cole, I opened my folder but didn't remove anything yet. Can we start with the provision cited in the warning? The property manager projected it onto the wall. Storage of recreational vehicles. Patty immediately pointed toward the screen. Exactly. I read the paragraph silently while everyone else did the same. Does Cedar Ridge have a separate provision prohibiting any RV from remaining overnight in a driveway? I asked. The manager looked through her packet. Not one cited in this notice. Is there a definition in this section stating that one overnight stop automatically constitutes storage? Another pause. Not in this section. Patty leaned forward. You're arguing semantics. Everyone knows what storage means. I'm asking what this warning means. I slid my timeline across the table. Richard read it aloud. Arrival, 9:43 p.m. Electrical connection documented, 10:02. Repair completed, 8:41 a.m. Departure, 9:17 a.m. Patty shook her head. It still stayed overnight. Yes, I said. Nobody disputes that. That answer seemed to interrupt the argument she expected me to make. I wasn't claiming the RV vanished at midnight. I wasn't pretending Michael and Emily hadn't slept inside it. The question was whether those facts established the specific violation Cedar Ridge had issued. I handed Richard the repair documentation. Michael stopped because of an electrical problem. I connected temporary power, diagnosed the charging issue in daylight, replaced the failed component, tested the system, and he continued traveling. Patty lifted one of her photographs. And this proves the hookup. Can we display that one? The manager projected Patty's 8:19 image. There I was, kneeling beside the open compartment. Tools on the driveway. Meter visible. Orange cord behind me. Patty crossed her arms. Thank you. What time was that taken? I asked. The manager checked. 8:19 a.m. And when did the RV leave? Richard looked at the timeline. 9:17. I let the room sit with those 58 minutes. The photograph hadn't changed. Its meaning had. Patty saw a campsite. The timeline showed active work immediately before departure. Richard studied the image, then the rule. So your position isn't that the HOA can never regulate overnight RV parking? Correct, I said. If Cedar Ridge adopts or identifies a rule that applies, enforce it. My position is that this warning cites prohibited storage, and the evidence shows a temporary stop connected to a documented travel interruption. Patty exhaled sharply. This is ridiculous. An RV stayed overnight. That should be enough. I looked at the provision glowing on the wall. This was the moment everything had been moving towards since she pounded on my door at 6:08. I didn't raise my voice. Then show me the word. Richard looked at me. Which word? I pointed toward the rule. Overnight. The room went silent. For several seconds, nobody answered me. Rain whispered against the clubhouse windows, and the projector fan made a low mechanical hum beneath the silence. On the wall, the recreational vehicle provision remained enlarged in black letters. I watched Richard Bennett read it from beginning to end. Then he read it again. Patty finally broke the silence. It doesn't have to literally say overnight. Richard looked up. Maybe not, but we still need to determine whether the conduct documented here supports the storage violation that was issued. Patty tapped her photograph. They slept in it. It was connected to power. There was a leveling block under the wheel. What else would you call that? I could have argued with every point. Instead, I pulled one sheet from my folder. Can we put the timeline beside the photograph? The property manager split the display. On the left, Patty's 8:19 image of me kneeling beside the open electrical compartment. On the right, 5 timestamps. 9:43 p.m. Arrival. 10:02 p.m. Temporary electrical connection documented. 6:11 a.m. Patty's first photographs. 8:41 a.m. Repair completed and tested. 9:17 a.m. Departure. Richard leaned closer. So the vehicle was there for 11 hours and 34 minutes. Correct. And it left before the noon deadline Patty gave you. Yes, although that deadline wasn't why it left. Michael was already scheduled to continue once I finished the repair. Patty folded her arms. Convenient. I nodded toward her photograph. You took that before the repair was finished. She looked at the screen. Because it was still there. Exactly. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means your photograph documents the reason it was still there at 8:19. Tools. Meter. Open compartment. Orange cord. The same details she had treated as evidence of permanence now sat inside a timeline ending 58 minutes later with the RV driving away. Susan Miller, one of the committee members, turned toward the property manager. Do we have evidence it had been there before 9:43 the previous night? No. Any evidence it returned afterward? No. Any prior repeated RV parking at this property? None in the file. Patty shifted in her chair. So now someone can call something a repair and keep an RV indefinitely? No, I said. That isn't what happened, and it isn't what I'm asking you to approve. I pointed toward the timeline. I'm asking you to decide this incident based on this incident. That mattered. I didn't need the board to declare that every RV could stay overnight. I didn't need a permanent exemption. I needed them to stop turning one temporary stop into something larger than the evidence supported. Richard picked up the repair documentation. And this connector was actually replaced that morning? Yes. You had it in your work inventory? Yes. He set the page down. Patty looked toward the orange cord in her photograph again. Her certainty was still there, but it had nowhere clean to land. Every time she tried to turn the image into permanence, the next timestamp pulled it toward departure. Richard folded his hands. I think the real issue is whether the association can support the specific storage violation it issued under the provision cited. He looked around the table. Unless anyone has additional evidence, I think we're ready to address that. Patty said nothing. On the wall behind her, her best photograph remained frozen at 8:19 a.m., 58 minutes before the RV left Cedar Ridge. Richard didn't rush the decision. He turned the printed timeline sideways, placed the repair documentation beside it, and studied Patty's photograph one last time. Nobody in the room seemed interested in arguing about whether an RV had spent the night in my driveway anymore. It had. Nobody disputed the extension cord, the leveling block, or the fact that Michael and Emily had slept inside. The question had become narrower and more important. Did those facts support the specific storage violation Cedar Ridge had issued? Susan Miller spoke first. I don't think they do. Patty immediately turned toward her. You can't be serious. Susan remained calm. I'm not saying we can't regulate recreational vehicles. I'm saying this notice cites storage, and what we have here is one documented overnight stop followed by repair work and departure the next morning. Patty pointed toward the projected image. He connected it to his house. Temporarily, Richard said, and we have documentation explaining why. Patty's voice sharpened. So the extension cord means nothing? I looked at the orange line glowing across the photograph. It means exactly what it was being used for. She stared at me, which is temporary power while I dealt with the electrical problem that stopped Michael's trip. Richard raised a hand before Patty could answer. Let's keep this focused on the notice. He looked toward the property manager. Has management identified any separate overnight parking or occupancy provision applicable to this incident? She shook her head. No separate provision has been provided for this review. The warning was issued under the recreational vehicle storage section. Richard nodded slowly. Then I don't think we should rewrite that section during an enforcement hearing. That sentence changed the room. Patty leaned back. Everyone in this neighborhood understands what the rule is supposed to prevent. Then the rule should say clearly what the association intends to prohibit, Susan replied. Residents shouldn't have to guess whether one night, 12 hours, or some other period becomes storage. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The argument had finally moved away. From Patty versus me. It was document versus enforcement. Richard called for a motion. Susan moved to withdraw the warning on the basis that the evidence presented did not sufficiently establish the storage violation described under the cited provision. Another committee member seconded. The motion passed. No applause. No dramatic gasp. Just pens moving across paper while the property manager marked the notice withdrawn. Patty looked at me. So you won. That's not how I see it. Your violation disappeared. Because the evidence didn't support the violation as written. She gathered her photographs into a stack. The picture of the orange cord ended up on top. You'll do this again. Have my brother break down? I asked. Park an RV overnight. If Cedar Ridge adopts a clear rule that prohibits something, I'll follow it. She paused. And if it doesn't? then nobody should invent one at 6 in the morning. Richard suppressed what looked like the beginning of a smile. Before closing the review, he asked management to prepare clearer RV guidance for future consideration so residents and committee members wouldn't have to interpret undefined boundaries during another dispute. Outside, the rain had stopped. The pavement reflected the clubhouse lights as I walked toward my truck. I thought about the orange cord hanging in my garage. Patty had photographed it because she believed it proved Michael intended to stay. The committee had seen the same cord beside the tools, timestamps, and repair record and understood something different. It was never evidence that the RV was settling in. It was evidence that we were getting it ready to move on. Justice hadn't required me to prove an RV could stay forever. I only had to prove that one night didn't become forever because Patty decided to call it storage. 3 weeks later, the orange extension cord was hanging exactly where it belonged, coiled neatly on a steel hook beside my garage workbench. I noticed it Saturday morning while loading tools into my truck. Sunlight came through the open garage door, catching the bright orange insulation and throwing a thin reflection across the concrete. My phone buzzed. Michael had sent me a photograph from a campground 2 states away. His RV sat beneath tall pine trees with the awning extended, 2 folding chairs outside, and Emily holding a ridiculous oversized marshmallow over a fire pit. Under the picture he wrote, "Electrical system still perfect. Your campground had better service, though." I laughed. "Still no gift shop," I texted back. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was what an RV campsite actually looked like. Awning, chairs, campfire, people planning to stay. Nothing like the 11 hours and 34 minutes Michael had spent in my driveway, because his electrical system needed attention. I slipped my phone into my pocket and carried another tool case toward the truck. Across the street, Patty Reynolds was collecting her mail. She looked toward my garage, then toward the orange cord. For half a second, our eyes met. 3 weeks earlier, seeing that cord had been enough for her to photograph my property from multiple angles and decide she already understood what was happening. This time, she simply nodded. I nodded back. No phone came out. No argument followed. A low engine rumble rolled down Cedar Ridge Boulevard. Both of us looked toward the entrance as another RV appeared between the houses, larger than Michael's, and towing a small car behind it. It moved slowly through the neighborhood, past my driveway, and continued toward the far exit without stopping. Patty watched it disappear around the corner. Then she carried her mail inside. That was it. No confrontation. No invented emergency. Just an RV passing through a neighborhood. A week after my hearing, Cedar Ridge Management had circulated a notice explaining that the board would review its recreational vehicle language and clarify future parking and storage standards. I appreciated the wording. They hadn't declared that RVs could stay wherever they wanted. They hadn't pretended the association had no authority to regulate them. They had simply acknowledged that enforcement worked better when residents could read a rule and understand exactly what conduct it prohibited. I finished loading my truck and returned to the garage. Before lowering the door, I reached up and touched the orange cord. Funny how an ordinary object could carry 2 completely different stories. Patty had looked at it and seen permanence, hookups, occupancy, storage. I had looked at it and seen a temporary connection between a garage and a vehicle that needed enough power and time to safely continue its trip. Neither the cord nor the photograph had changed. The context had. I pressed the garage door button. The motor hummed overhead. The door descended slowly, narrowing the bright rectangle of morning until only a strip of sunlight remained across the floor. 3 weeks earlier, Patty had pounded on my door at 6:08 convinced that an RV spending one night in my driveway meant I was turning Cedar Ridge into a campground. By 9:17 that same morning, the RV was gone. The evidence remained. 9:43 p.m., 10:02 p.m., 6:11 a.m., 8:41 a.m., 9:17 a.m. Arrival, connection, complaint, repair, departure. Those times had done something anger never could. They separated what actually happened from what someone wanted to call it. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. Justice wasn't proving that Michael's RV had a right to stay forever. It was proving that one temporary night didn't become forever just because Patty said it did. The RV was temporary. The evidence was permanent.